Picture this. It's 1923. A packed beer hall in Munich. Angry veterans, hyper-nationalists, conspiracy theorists, men with medals, men with grudges, men who think yelling is a political philosophy. A speaker climbs onto a chair. He has the same intensity, the same hunger for attention, the same gift for turning personal failure into public rage. But in this timeline, Adolf Hitler is black, and suddenly the entire machinery of 20th century fascism starts choking on its own contradictions. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If Hitler had been black, history does not simply become same dictator, different skin tone. The world around him changes. The people who listen to him change. The ideology he tried to ride changes. And most likely, the Nazi Party as we know it never takes power. So today we're asking one of the strangest alternate history questions possible. What if Adolf Hitler were black? And the answer is not black Nazi Germany. The answer is much weirder. Before we begin, obvious but necessary statement. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime were responsible for one of the greatest crimes in human history. This video is not a joke about that suffering, and it is not trying to make fascism look cool, clever, or quirky. This is about historical causality. Because sometimes the most interesting alternate histories are not the ones where one detail changes and everything else stays the same. Sometimes the detail you change is a load-bearing wall, and the whole building collapses. And Hitler's racial identity would have been exactly that. Part 1. The world. He is born into our story still begins in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, a small Austrian town near the German border. In our timeline, Adolf Hitler grows up as a poor, angry, alienated Austrian boy who becomes obsessed with German nationalism. He wants to be an artist, gets rejected by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, drifts through Vienna, absorbs poisonous racial politics, serves in World War I, and later turns his resentment into a political weapon. But now let's make him black. There are a few ways to imagine this. Maybe one of his parents has African ancestry. Maybe he is adopted into the Hitler household. Maybe, through the strange movements of empire, labor, colonial networks, and migration, a visibly black child is raised in the same Austrian-German world. The exact family tree mechanics matter less than the social reality, because a black Adolf Hitler in late 19th century Austria would be rare, visible, and constantly marked as different. That means young Adolf does not grow up as just another resentful German-speaking outsider. He grows up as an outsider among outsiders. And that changes everything. In our timeline, Hitler's ego is wounded because he believes he deserves recognition and does not get it. In this timeline, that wound is deeper, but it also points in a different direction. He is not merely poor. He is not merely rejected. He is racially excluded from the very nationalist fantasy that, in real history, gave him a stage. Imagine teenage Adolf sitting in classrooms where German nationalism is romanticized. Ancient tribes, blood, soil, destiny, heroic blonde warriors painted like fantasy novel cover art. And Adolf is sitting there thinking, "Great speech, Professor. Quick question. Where exactly do I fit into this?" The answer, from the racial nationalists of the time, would be brutal. He doesn't. Part 2. Vienna. Still rejects him. Now we get to Vienna. This is one of the most important parts of Hitler's real life. He moves to Vienna hoping to become an artist. He is rejected by the Academy of Fine Arts. He lives in poverty. He becomes increasingly bitter. And Vienna, at that time, is a stew of mass politics. Nationalism, anti-Semitism, socialism, Catholic populism, imperial bureaucracy, ethnic tension, and newspapers screaming at everyone. In our timeline, Hitler absorbs the ugliest currents around him and later repackages them. In this timeline, Vienna is still cruel to him, but not in the same way. The Art Academy probably still rejects him. His work was heavy on architecture and weak on human figures. That part can remain. He still lives cheaply. He still wanders. He still resents elites. He still develops the emotional style that later becomes his political brand: grievance, melodrama, certainty, blame. But the key difference is that the racial movements he might want to join do not want him. German racial nationalism in this period is not just "we like Germany." It increasingly defines Germanness as blood, ancestry, biology, and imagined racial purity. A black Adolf can shout, "I am German," all he wants. The Völkisch nationalists answer, "No, you are not." So instead of becoming a perfect vessel for racial nationalism, he becomes a contradiction inside it. He might still become radical. He might still become authoritarian. He might still become anti-Semitic, anti-Marxist, conspiratorial, and obsessed with national humiliation. People from marginalized groups are not magically immune to hatred or tyranny. But he cannot plausibly become the prophet of Aryan supremacy. That lane is closed, and this is where the timeline starts to bend. Part 3. World War I. The Great Filter. Then comes World War I. In real history, Hitler serves in the Bavarian army, works as a dispatch runner, is wounded, receives medals, and later mythologizes the war as the purest experience of his life. It gives him identity. It gives him comradeship. It gives him a story. Our alternate Adolf still wants that. He wants belonging. He wants discipline. He wants a uniform that says, "You are part of something larger." But in this timeline, his military experience is different. He is watched more closely. He is treated as an oddity. Some comrades may respect his courage. Others may never stop seeing him through race first. Maybe he still serves bravely. Maybe he is still wounded. Maybe he still receives a medal, although with more controversy attached. But when the war ends, he comes home not as a symbol of the betrayed German soldier, but as a problem the nationalist movement does not know how to use. This matters because the real Hitler's post-war image was incredibly important. He could stand in front of angry Germans and say, "I was one of you. I suffered with you. I bled with you. I am the voice of the front." A black veteran in post-war Germany could say that too. But the far right would not fully believe him. And worse for him, their propaganda would actively work against him. After World War I, racist panic in Germany intensified around black French colonial troops stationed in the occupied Rhineland. Far-right propaganda portrayed blackness as humiliation, contamination, and occupation. Now imagine a black Hitler trying to become the leader of that same far right. It is not just unlikely, it is politically radioactive. Part 4. The movement rejects him. So now we reach Munich after World War I. In our timeline, this is where Hitler finds the German Workers' Party, starts speaking at meetings, and eventually turns a tiny extremist club into the Nazi Party. But in this timeline, the room reacts differently. He can still speak. He can still rage about Versailles, humiliation, betrayal, and national rebirth. He might even be good at it. But the problem is obvious. A black man cannot easily become the face of a movement obsessed with racial purity. Every time he talks about German blood, someone in the room is thinking, "What about yours?" That contradiction kills his rise before it begins. The party might use him briefly as a curiosity or a useful speaker. But once the movement becomes more racial, more paranoid, and more extreme, he becomes a liability. So instead of becoming the Führer, Black Adolf Hitler becomes a fringe figure. Angry, ambitious, dangerous, but blocked from the very ideology he wants to control. And that changes everything. Part 5. The Nazi Party without Hitler. Without Hitler, the Nazi Party probably still exists. Germany is still angry. The Treaty of Versailles still hurts. Veterans still feel betrayed. The economy still collapses. Anti-Semitism and far-right nationalism are still very real. But the party loses its most important weapon, Hitler himself. He did not invent every Nazi idea. A lot of those ideas already existed. What he did was package them. He gave the far right a voice, a symbol, a performance, and a leader cult. He turned scattered hatred into a mass political movement. Without him, the German far right stays divided. You still have monarchists, generals, businessmen, street fighters, racists, and anti-communists. But they do not automatically unite behind one man. Germany might still become authoritarian, but it probably looks less like the Third Reich and more like a military conservative dictatorship. Still repressive, still dangerous, still anti-Semitic, but not the same Nazi machine. Part 7. What happens to Black Hitler? So what happens to him? Most likely, he becomes a historical footnote. Maybe he writes bitter books. Maybe he gives speeches to small crowds. Maybe he tries to build a version of fascism based not on race, but on loyalty, obedience, militarism, and revenge. But the racial nationalists never fully accept him. That is the dark irony. He wants to belong to a movement built on exclusion. And eventually, that movement excludes him too. He may be pushed out. He may be denounced. He may even become a target of the same hatred he helped spread. Not because he became good, but because hateful ideologies always need someone to reject. So the answer to this alternate history question is not Black Hitler rules Nazi Germany. The realistic answer is much stranger. Black Hitler probably never becomes Hitler. He might still be angry. He might still be dangerous. He might still become a fascist agitator. But he cannot become the symbol of Aryan supremacy because his very existence breaks the myth. The real Hitler rose because his followers could project their fantasies onto him. They saw him as the voice of German humiliation, revenge, racial destiny, and national rebirth. A Black Hitler could not play that role in the same society. The movement would face its contradiction immediately, and movements built on racial purity usually resolve contradictions one way: they exclude. So in this timeline, Germany may still become authoritarian. Europe may still face war. The 20th century is still violent. But the Nazi rise to power becomes far less likely. World War II changes. The Holocaust as we know it likely does not happen. And Adolf Hitler becomes one of history's strangest almosts, a man with the rage to become a dictator, but not the identity needed to sell the dictatorship he wanted. A would-be Führer locked outside his own fantasy. And that may be the biggest lesson here. History is not just made by individuals. It is made by the myths people are willing to believe about them. In our timeline, Germany believed Hitler's myth until it destroyed millions of lives. In this one, the myth collapses before it can fully begin. If you want more alternate history scenarios that sound ridiculous at first, but reveal something serious underneath, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what timeline we should break next. Because history is fragile. And sometimes, changing one detail does not rewrite the story. It makes the story impossible.